Now that our screens have been prepped, coated, and dried, let's move on to exposing the image onto the screen. First, we'll walk through how to align films to a screen, then we'll head to exposing screens and rinsing out the image. Aligning film positives to the screen seems like a tricky task, but it's fairly simple. Every film for the job needs to sit in the exact same place on each screen. A registration template helps get perfect registration every time, but it's an investment. All you really need to get perfect film alignment is a T-square. Measure the width of the screen and mark the center line on the frame of the t-shirt side of the screen. If you're printing left chest prints, make another mark about 3.5 inches to the left of this center line on the frame. Flip the T-square vertically and line it up with the center mark. Slide the film under the T-square to line up the registration marks with the center. The registration marks should be a couple of inches from the frame. Once it's lined up, mark the registration measurement on the T-square itself. This way, you'll be able to line up the other films for the job exactly. For a more detailed walkthrough of this process, check out the blog listed in the description. Tape the film onto the screen and it's ready for exposure. To get great exposure, a screen needs proper exposure time. Dialing in exposure takes a bit of practice, so don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. This can be one of the more challenging steps of the learning process, and every setup is a little different. LED lights is the new standard in exposure units. It's more economical, less wasteful, provides stronger stencil development, and allows printers to do more with the screen. All base layer exposure units, even the DIY bulb, come equipped with LED lights for the best exposure possible. Some exposure units have vacuums, which create the tightest positive contact possible and expose very quickly. The unit most printers start out with is a compression unit. This is the base layer X1620. It doesn't have a lid, so we have to create the positive contact on the screen ourselves. Positive contact means eliminating all space between the screen, film, and glass. Good positive contact starts with about 15 to 30 pounds of pressure on top of the screen. This creates a tight bond between the film, mesh, and light source. If space remains, the UV light creates a shadowing effect, and you can lose stencil detail. A perfectly exposed screen means that the UV light has thoroughly exposed all the emulsion not blocked by the opaque parts of the film. This fully hardens the emulsion. The parts of the emulsion that did not get exposed to the UV light will rinse out like a dream, leaving you with a stencil. Overexposure means that too much light has been introduced to the image area, making it difficult to wash out. Underexposure means the light didn't get a chance to penetrate all the way through. The emulsion on the back of the screen will be slimy, and the screen can break down on press. To make sure the screen is properly exposed, use an exposure calculator. This simple test measures exposure levels by using different densities of black filters on the calculator. Place it on the same side of the screen as the film. After washing out, if you are seeing a solid step 7, you are properly exposed. Under 7 means the screen is underexposed, while over 7 means the screen is overexposed. When testing exposure times, keep notes so you know how to adjust next time. Place the screen t-shirt side down on the exposure glass. Then, place a piece of foam on top of the mesh. The piece of foam that comes with these units is a perfect fit. Place a piece of wood on top of the foam to disperse the weight evenly across the screen. Next, we'll grab a couple of buckets of emulsion to place on top of the board for added weight. Anything you have around will do. These buckets weigh about 24 pounds altogether and should create a great stencil. Generally, suggested exposure times are listed on the product page for each emulsion. Since we used base layer long-lasting emulsion, we can check the product page on screenprinting.com to see what the suggested exposure times are. According to these suggestions, we should expose our 156 white mesh screen with the X series unit for about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. This exposure unit doesn't have a built-in timer, so I'm going to use the timer on my phone. Turn on the light to start exposing your screen. Now that we're done exposing, let's take this screen to the washout booth and rinse out the image to see how well it exposed. Get the screen wet on both sides using the fan setting on the hose. This will help break down the areas of unexposed emulsion and develop the screen. Let the screen sit for 30 to 45 seconds while periodically spraying water on the image. And then apply medium pressure with a hose nozzle to fully rinse out the image area. It's also a good idea to rinse out the t-shirt side of the screen first because that side has the stronger emulsion. Check to see what step the exposure calculator stopped at. If you were at step 7, then you have a perfectly exposed screen. Now it's time to dry it. Drying screens after exposure is pretty much the same as drying them after prep. Place them in a warm area with lots of airflow and low humidity. If it's nice out, drying screens outside is also an option. This will post-expose the screen, making it much more durable. Post-exposure is great for long water-based print runs. Post-exposure is possible with an exposure unit too. Once the screen has been rinsed out and dried, expose it again for 2 to 3 times the original exposure time. Once the screens are dry, it's time for a final quality check before we take them to the press. Checking screens for pinholes and fisheyes before heading to press is important. Fisheyes occur when oils and chemicals are left on the screen after the reclaim process. Pinholes are little holes that pop up on your exposed screen when dust or lint get on your mesh before coating, or from when grime is left on your exposure unit glass. Use a light to check for these issues. Check the screen carefully and block pinholes with tape or a blockout pin. For a complete walkthrough on preventing pinholes and fisheyes in your darkroom, check out the link in the description. Now it's time to set up the press for printing. Welcome to How to Screen Print with a Kit, the 150 edition. In this free course, I'll be walking you through every step of the process, from darkroom setup to reclaim. I'll be using the Riley Hopkins 150 kit. It has everything you need to start a screen printing hobby or side hustle. Jump in today and get screen printing tomorrow.